6 radar contacts, no transponders, no radio calls, no warning. Just 6 Soviet-era fighters dropping through 3,000 feet in the black pre-dawn air over the Persian Gulf, noses pointed directly at the most powerful warship ever built by human hands. The Iranian pilots were convinced they had surprise on their side. They were wrong. Dead wrong. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the USS Abraham Lincoln had been tracking their heartbeats since before their engines even turned over. And in the next 11 minutes and 43 seconds, those 6 men would learn the most brutal lesson in modern military history. One of them would not be flying home. To understand why 6 Iranian pilots climbed into their cockpits that morning willing to risk a war, you have to understand the pressure cooker that the Persian Gulf had become. For months, American carrier groups had been conducting freedom of navigation operations deep in waters Tehran considers sovereign territory. To the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, every American flight deck photograph, every press conference, every carrier strike group sailing through the Strait of Hormuz was a slap to Iranian national identity broadcast on international television. Senior IRGC commanders were hemorrhaging credibility. Their domestic audience had been fed a relentless diet of state media propaganda, that American carriers were aging, vulnerable, that Washington was in decline, that Iran was rising. At some point, you have to cash the check your mouth has been writing. So they planned a provocation, not an attack, a demonstration. 6 MiG-29 Fulcrums, capable, lethal aircraft originally engineered to kill American fighters over European battlefields, would vector toward the Lincoln in attack formation, force Washington to blink, generate propaganda footage, and return home as heroes. What the IRGC commanders fundamentally misread was the difference between American restraint and American weakness. They are not the same thing, not even close.
The USS Abraham Lincoln isn't just a ship. She's a floating sovereign nation, 1,092 feet of nuclear-powered, radar-saturated, missile-bristling American geopolitical will. Her 2 Westinghouse A4W reactors generate 550 megawatts of continuous power. She displaces 100,000 tons fully loaded. Her 5,500-person crew includes some of the most comprehensively trained military operators on the planet, and her sensors never sleep. At 52 nautical miles out, before those MiG-29s had even settled into their attack profile, the Lincoln's AN Spy-1D phased array radar painted all 6 contacts in a single sweep, bearing 093 degrees true, speed accelerating, altitude descending, transponders silent. 2.3 seconds after first contact, threat data cascaded through the entire strike group's network simultaneously, not sequentially, simultaneously. The cruiser USS Gettysburg's Aegis system snapped to full tracking. Destroyers USS Stedham and USS Porter pivoted their phased array radars toward the threat axis. Surface-to-air missile batteries went from standby to ready. Electronic warfare suites began silently harvesting every radar emission those Iranian pilots were generating, emissions that would later be analyzed, cataloged, and used against them in future engagements they don't even know are being planned. The computers ran the math instantly. The Iranian formation would reach weapons release range in exactly 11 minutes and 43 seconds. For a carrier strike group that can launch aircraft and prosecute a threat within 60 seconds, 11 minutes wasn't a crisis. It was a luxury. The scramble order hit the flight deck at 5:51 a.m. What happened next was not chaos. It was choreographed violence performed by professionals who had rehearsed this sequence hundreds of times until the muscle memory was carved into bone. Color-coded deck crews sprinted across non-skid steel still damp from overnight condensation. 2 A-18E Super Hornets, 44 tons of American aerospace engineering, already spotted on catapults, pilots already strapped in, engines already at idle, were pushed forward. Safety pins yanked from weapons pylons, AIM-120 AMRAAM missiles confirmed armed, a launch sequence that normally takes 4 minutes, compressed into 90 seconds of controlled fury. The catapult officer crouched, swept the deck clear, slashed his illuminated wand toward the bow. 3 seconds, 0 to 165 miles per hour across 310 feet of flight deck. Python 1 rocketed off the bow, afterburner painting the pre-dawn sky nuclear orange. Python 2 followed 15 seconds later with identical violence. Their orders were simple: find 6 Iranian fighters, get between them and the boat, and do not, under any circumstances, let them reach the Lincoln. 9 minutes to intercept. The 6 MiG-29s pressed inward, descending through 8,000 feet now, holding the classic Soviet Doctrine attack spread their Russian instructors had drilled into them. They were flying low, using ground clutter from the Zagros Mountains to blur their radar return. It was textbook, disciplined, professional. It also assumed that surprise was still possible. It wasn't. 7 minutes. Python flight climbed through 20,000 feet and turned hard to intercept geometry. Their radars acquired the Iranian formation at 68 nautical miles. The Iranians didn't even know they were being tracked. Closure rate over 1,000 miles per hour combined. The tactical picture was complete, one-sided, and utterly brutal. What the Iranian commanders didn't know was that aboard the USS Gettysburg, fire control technicians had already locked SM-2 Standard missiles on all 6 Iranian tracks. Each warhead, 137 pounds of blast fragmentation with terminal guidance accurate enough to target a specific section of airframe. The Gettysburg could have killed all 6 MiG-29s before their pilots saw a single American aircraft. They were already dead. They just didn't know it yet.
3 minutes and 30 seconds to merge. Python 1 made visual contact. 6 Fulcrums in loose combat spread. Twin tails catching the pale morning light. Iranian Air Force roundels visible on their fuselages. Aggressive posture. Descending. Fast. He didn't wait. He climbed immediately to 22,000 feet. His wingmen stayed lower. Classic bracket. The Iranians were no longer hunters. In the span of 4 seconds, they had become the prey. Every Iranian pilot heard it simultaneously, their radar warning receivers screaming. American fire control radar, lock tone. Someone had a missile pointed at each of them right now. The formation wavered. 2 aircraft climbed, 1 broke right. Their attack geometry fractured. The Americans had seized the initiative without firing a single round. But the MiG-29s didn't turn back. Not yet. They reformed, pressed on. 24 miles from the Lincoln now. Close enough that her CIWS phalanx systems autonomously acquired all 6 aircraft and began tracking. 6 radar-guided 20mm Gatling guns, each capable of 4,500 rounds per minute of tungsten penetrators rotating silently in the pre-dawn air. The weapon board showed 6 green lights. Locked. Tracking. Waiting. What followed was 43 minutes of the most dangerous aerial chess match of the 21st century. Individual MiG-29s began peeling off for aggressive passes. One screams to 400 feet above the wavetops, rockwash churning the Persian Gulf surface, rocketing toward the Lincoln's bow at 480 knots before pulling up in a last-second afterburner climb. Another rolled across the destroyer Porter's superstructure at 600 feet, close enough that sailors felt the shockwave in their chests. And then, at 6:14 a.m., one MiG-29 broke from the formation and pointed its nose directly at the Lincoln's island superstructure, descending, fast, not pulling up, through 2,000 feet, through 1,500, through 1,000. Python 1's voice cut through every radio in the strike group. Bandit, continuing attack profile. Request weapons free. The tactical action officer had 2 seconds. Python 1, you are weapons free. Engage. One AIM-120 AMRAAM dropped clean from the wing rail. Its seeker locked the heat signature of twin afterburners burning white hot in the morning air. Mach 2.5, a white smoke trail across a pale blue sky. 6:14:23 a.m. Impact. Right engine nacelle. The 20.8-pound warhead detonated with mathematical precision. The right engine became a fireball. Shrapnel tore through hydraulic lines, fuel systems, and flight control surfaces in milliseconds. The MiG-29 rolled violently right, entering an uncontrollable spin. 600 feet above the Persian Gulf, inverted, on fire, losing altitude at catastrophic speed. At 400 feet, the Iranian pilot did the only thing left to do. He pulled the handle. 17 times the force of gravity, spine compressed in a fraction of a second. White parachute blossoming against the pale sky just as his aircraft hit the water in a 500-knot explosion of fuel, metal, and vaporized ambition. The remaining 5 MiG-29s broke immediately. Every aggressive maneuver ceased in an instant. They ran, climbing hard, accelerating toward Iranian airspace at maximum power, leaving their wingman floating in an orange dye slick 12 miles from the most powerful carrier on Earth. The Lincoln never changed course, not 1 degree, not 1 knot. 18 minutes later, an Iranian rescue helicopter departed Bandar Abbas. American forces monitored the recovery operation and said nothing. Maritime law requires it. American professionalism delivered it. The Iranian pilot was pulled from the Gulf alive, with minor injuries and an education that no flight school on Earth could have provided him. His debrief would be devastating to IRGC leadership. American response time, seconds. Weapons accuracy, absolute. Willingness to engage, beyond doubt when threat criteria were met. Iran's state media eventually settled on mechanical failure as their public explanation. Nobody believed it. But here's what the official log entry won't tell you. Every radar emission from those 6 MiG-29s was harvested and cataloged. Every panicked radio transmission during the engagement, including the fear in pilots' voices as they watched their wingman fall, was recorded, translated, and sent to intelligence analysts. Iran just handed the United States a complete electronic warfare profile of their frontline fighter aircraft. They paid for that lesson with a $25 million aircraft, a traumatized pilot, and the complete evaporation of their propaganda narrative. Meanwhile, in Beijing, in Riyadh, in Tel Aviv, military commanders were watching the footage and running their own calculations. Oil markets spiked before the sun fully rose. Defense contractors' stock values climbed before Wall Street opened. The geopolitical aftershock of a 5-minute engagement rippled through every theater command on Earth. Because this is what people get wrong about American carrier groups. They don't just project power, they define the boundaries of the possible in every ocean on the planet. Every nation with regional ambitions runs their strategic planning against the question, what happens if an American carrier shows up? Now, thanks to 6 MiG-29 pilots and 1 catastrophic miscalculation, that question had a very specific, very public answer. 6 fighters crossed the line, 1 came home in pieces, 5 came home in silence, and the Lincoln sailed on, unhurried, undamaged, and utterly unmoved. The question that should keep every adversary awake tonight isn't whether America will respond, it's whether you'll even see it coming before it's already over.